Welcome back. Welcome back to the Connected Teamwork Summit. I'm Hilke Farber. I'm here today with Christine Linde. Christine, how are you today?
I'm good. How are you, Helki?
I am good. I'm so grateful you're here. We're going to talk more in a second about Christine. But before we do that, I want to take a brief moment to reflect on the beginning of the day today and the learnings we've had, thinking about the first four team defining moments, the white belt moments, we call them. And we heard from Carson about how important it is to appreciate each other, to help each other see each other. We talked about how Urban was talking about when we set goals, if they're authentic, they really help to get us out of our limitations. They help us to get through our limitations by being focused on our goals. And I loved what Matt told us about how setting a context, a higher purpose creates space for more authenticity and how that these things feed off each other. And then Vignesh's lovely stories about gazelles and Amazon trees that talk more about how do we actually need to stay grounded and grow deep roots before we extend, so that we can actually be uh, of true service and true service. We played the game, and now we're going to look at the last two moments for the day that we're going to look at. And the first one is group reflection and learning with Christine Linde. And Christine, I know Christine about half a year, I think now. We had once coffee, our tea together in Scottsdale. Christine is the global marketing director of Microsoft Business Group at Evidence. He's responsible for developing and executing marketing strategy for Evidence Microsoft Solutions. He has over 20 years of experience in marketing, communications, and business development. And she is very passionate about innovation, purposefulness, satisfaction, customer satisfaction, social impact, and loves travel and yoga and balance. I read about that. So, and I know Christine is somebody who is just deeply kind, very focused on being truthful, being here, and making choices that are authentic rather than going with the maelstrom of busyness that seems to overwhelm our world very easily. So, what not a great topic than to talk about with you than group reflection, Christine. So, yeah, let's dive in. Let's dive
Let's
in.
do it.
Um, but my first question to you is, what can you say to us about the value of group reflection and how that helps with building connectedness in teams?
Yeah, I think I'll start off by talking about how challenging it is to get to group reflection.
Mm,
I think if everyone on this call has a life that's similar to mine, you find that we all have an amazing amount of work that we have to do.
mm,
We have the tendency to really only look forward. Once we've completed something, we don't typically take the time to sit back, ponder, and reflect about what have we done, right? Because we're so focused and concerned about the things that are ahead of us that we have to take care of, and the future is important, but learning from the past has an incredible amount of value.
right.
So I've had to be very intentional about creating kind of milestone moments
Mm,
um, throughout a given period of time. And, certainly, with various projects, they have different start times and stop times. But what I do on a regular basis is every 6 months, I do take a moment to stop and create a summary of everything that has been done in the
mm,
previous 6 months.
mm,
And I gather together my team or virtual team members, people that aren't in my direct team to review it, reflect on it. And this does a couple of things. One is we pat ourselves on our backs for a job well done, right?
Mhm.
Let's celebrate those successes, but also let's talk about the things that didn't work and what was that about? What things and what elements occurred so that we weren't able to meet certain objectives or deliver certain projects,
Right.
and really listen and get feedback about what those things were. And it's a powerful exercise to go through, because it basically gives you, intelligence around what we could be doing better, and what are the things that other people think would help to bring about change, to overcome obstacles and hurdles and things that we haven't been able to accomplish in the past. So that's something at least every 6 months.
Great.
Take the time to do that.
Great. I love that discipline. The question I have is, you talked a little about your life, like how busy life can be, and I wonder how you personally do reflection, how Christine does reflection with Christine.
With Christine, Christine loves yoga. Christine loves meditation. I really, I work from home, right? I have a background going on here, but my kitchen is directly behind me. My dog is sleeping to my right. I work in a global company. There are people that are working at any given time of day. So I have to be very mindful about creating boundaries for myself. The time that I start working, the time that I stop working, and when I stop working, what do I do with that time? So I find time for meditation. I go for walks. I spend time with my family and my friends. Those are the things that, put the energy back into me, so that when I go back into my career life, I have something to draw upon. And so absolutely, really being intentional about creating those elements of my life and looking at myself as a whole person, right? Not just a machine that is there to work, but a human being that,
Yes.
Do those passion things that I love to do.
And so have you always been like this, or did you learn this along the way somehow?
Absolutely. I was not always like this. No, not at all. I have a 5 in front of the age, the number of my age at this point. So absolutely not. No, this is something trial and error over time, right? Putting too much of myself into things that I thought were of the utmost priority. And being a very driven person, definitely getting to points in time where I was falling down because I wasn't giving back to myself. And, just really just becoming more aware as I've evolved and changed over time, to learn that, by trial and error, that if you don't carve out time for yourself, if you don't set up appropriate boundaries, and if you're not clear on what it is that brings you joy and peace, then you won't find joy and peace. You've got to understand what does that for you, and what does that for me are the things that I mentioned. Meditating, yoga. I love to sing. My family and friends are incredibly important to me. Traveling, those are the things that put gas back into my tank and keep me connected with myself.
Well said. And very clear how you speak about it. Question is, what happens, or how do you notice that your tank is low?
Ooh. When I start feeling anxiety, when I start feeling fear, when I am easy to anger, those are the times when I'm like, okay, Christine, time to unplug, time to step away, take a breath, put things into perspective, and realize that that there's more to life than this problem, right? Put these situations into perspective, and realize that the only constant is change. The thing that is annoying me in this moment will be a distant memory at some point in the future.
Beautiful, yeah.
So just put it all into perspective.
Put things in perspective and realize that this problem will be a distant memory at some point.
It will.
That is very beautiful, very beautifully said. So how do you instill that, or how do you instill that discipline or that orientation of self-care and listening and keeping a gauge on the tank in your team or the people you work with?
Yeah, almost every day, right? I'm a connected person. Whether you are a friend of mine because we met through some other method, or whether you're a friend of mine because we work together, I want to know people. I like to sit back and listen, right? And to me, that's the best thing that I can do for people who work on my team, or people who are part of the organization that that don't report to me. I think I've become known as someone that you can bounce your ideas off of. If you have a frustration, you can come to me. I'll listen. I will not judge, but I'll also try to help put things into perspective and help to come up with ideas of what can be done to resolve an issue. Because we all run into issues every single day. And I had a conversation with one of my coworkers just the other day who was very worked up and upset. And I basically just said, take a deep breath for a minute, right? Like, get grounded back inside of yourself and realize that you're concerned. You're coming out of a place of fear, and that isn't going to serve you. So take a minute and understand that you've done everything that you possibly can to address this issue. And if someone is coming to you and saying that's not enough, then that's the disconnect, not your effort, not your intelligence, not what you've brought to the table. The disconnect is that you're being asked to do something that may not be possible. And it's okay to say that, right? To anyone.
Yes. Very liberating, very liberating. We're going to take a short break in a moment. And after the break, I want to dive a little bit more with you, Christine, in this topic of fear and how you reflect on fear with your team or with yourself, and what that does and how you work with that. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's take a short break. We're talking to Christine Linde, who is a global marketing director at Eviden, and also a spectacular human being who is tremendously purposeful and reflective, as we can already see from this part of the conversation. And thank you, Christine, and thank you for listening, everyone. So fear. Group reflection, fear and group reflection. How do you bring up the topic of fear, if at all, with others?
Oh gosh, I talk about it all the time. I mean, we all have it, right? It's not a topic that should be off the table to discuss. And I think it's rampant. I think the heart of team disconnection or interpersonal disconnection is rooted in fear. People are worried about failing. They're worried about being blamed for a failure. And, you know, in those moments, people go into a reactive state and a self-protective state, which can be completely counterproductive to, you know, the positive outcomes that we're all looking to drive. So, you know, they either react and lash out, or they shut down. That just leads to a complete communication breakdown. So, you know, what I try to do to resolve those issues is listen. You know, if I see that someone is shutting down, it may not even be in a conversation that I'm experiencing this. You know, you see emails, you see instant messages. There's a ton of different ways to become aware that a situation is breaking down. As a leader, whether you are a leader of a team because you have the title of a leader, or you are part of a team and you want to exhibit leadership behavior, your opportunity is to insert yourself into a situation and become a change agent and try to help. So, you know, I seek to understand first, because I think we all think we know what's going on in any given situation. You probably have an idea, but you may not know the whole story. So, you know, really seeking to understand, asking clarifying questions, and just providing support, creating a safe space for people to express themselves and to give you the context of the issue. And then not making hasty or reactive decisions in that moment. You know, let me sit on it for a minute. You know, we all try to work at this frenetic pace. As soon as I give an answer to this, then I can move on, and I can get on to the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. But to me, slowing down, taking a breath, and sitting on it for a minute, usually the right idea or the right solution comes in that moment. Or even just providing space for someone to express themselves, and then they come up with their own resolution to the issue. They just needed someone to be there, to be a mirror for them to talk it out. So, you know, I want to maintain engagement until there is a resolution that we can come to in some way, shape, or form. And it may not look exactly the way that we thought it should look, but there is always some way to get to a resolution. And, you know, then, you know, taking a moment and learning from those situations and realizing what went well, what didn't, and, you know, refining how you approach things moving forward based on the history and what you've learned from your previous experiences.
I imagine working with you, Christine, and knowing that you know that your intention is that we will work it out. We will work it out, even if the answer is not obvious in this moment, even if I or you or both of us feel reactive at the moment. I will work this out with you. And to me, that gives such a psychological safety, that creates such connectedness, and also invites me to actually be open, to reflect what's going on with me, you know, and get to the root cause, so I don't have to fabricate myself into some kind of solution. No.
And it's a ripple effect. You know, when somebody has someone treat them with that care, with that empathy, with providing a safe space, they then see that it's possible and maybe take that on as something that they want to do and to pass along, right? It's kindness and empathy in business, I think, is a resource that is undervalued because it really is. It's it's the key to finding resolution to any issue, is just understanding, empathy, creating safe space.
Great. So this kindness, gentleness, compassion is an underused resource and creates so much space for creativity and learning and all these things that are so important. How did you learn about this?
I think initially I think it came from my mother. My mother is an incredibly kind, empathetic, giving person. So I've had a female archetype to learn from. But I don't know, at my core, what I've learned is, because I've tried it the other way. Early in my career, I thought, okay, as a woman in business, I have to be strong. I have to be assertive. I have to be. Trying things in that way and realizing how spectacularly they failed and how terrible I felt about it. And then slowly building the confidence inside of myself to say, I'm going to do it the way that it feels right to me. And let's see how that goes. And since I have embraced that, I've been much more successful and happy, right? I'm happy with the balance of my life, because I'm acting from intention of who I am at the core. And who I am at the core is somebody who does not want to cause pain, doesn't want to inflict injury. But also I'm an analytical person. I love projects. I love getting things done. So it's not just all, sunshines, rainbows, and hugs. Right. I do like getting work product and result and being creative and infusing that into my work. But there does have to be a balance in it, right? There does need to be, the soft skills and then the execution skills.
Absolutely. What would you say to somebody who may feel reactive at the moment, may feel in this place of, I'm attacked, being attacked by whatever reason, colleague, vastness of the challenge that I have? And what would you say to a person that may have the thought, well, kindness is just too risky?
Yeah. I think in those moments, and in fact, I had a conversation very similar to this very, very recently. And I didn't approach it as much from the kindness perspective, but from the present the issue, right? To the person that is putting you on the spot. Present the issue, talk about what it is that they're asking you to do, what you've done to try and get that result in exactly the way that they're asking for it, in the time frame that they're asking for it, and then outline what you have done, and then outline what you need in addition to be able to get to that end point. Because it's not that you haven't done anything, you have. There are things standing in the way that are outside of your control. And so now it's your turn to ask for the support that you need to be able to get to that end goal. And what can they do to support you with that? It creates a dialogue instead of being reactive and just saying, this is a ridiculous ask and no one should ask this of me. And how dare you? You already know all of the issues that we face as an organization, blah, blah, blah. That's not going to get us anywhere. What's going to get us somewhere is ask for what you need. Just ask.
Ask for what you need. Very clear. Very clear. Ask for what you need. That's practicing self-kindness in a way. That's what you're talking about, like self-kindness, but also not being wishy-washy about it, saying, no, actually we have things to do, and being kind. And like Brené Brown likes to say, being clear is kind. I love that sort of sense of like, okay, let's just actually focus on what we need to focus on to actually make progress.
Right. Because we're all in some sort of relationship right? I mean, especially in work, right? Is the work situation right for you, right? There's a give and a get. If all you're doing is giving, you're not getting, that's not kind either. And that's not kind to yourself. So, in those moments, ask for what you need. And if you continue to not get it, maybe it's not the right relationship for you.
Right. That's that very, very helpful. Very helpful. Christine, we are almost getting towards the final bits of our conversation. Maybe a practical tip if you think about somebody where group reflection or self-reflection may not be their go-to yet. What would you say to them as a practical tip to get going?
Put it in your calendar, right? Like carve out the time. I think the reason that most people don't do self-reflection is because they don't set aside space to do it. Right. My own personal example is that, I do carve out time in my calendar, even throughout my week, to do specific activities that I know I need to do. And self-reflection or group reflection is something that if you want to do it, you're going to have to dedicate time to it. So put it into your calendar and carve out that time. And if you don't know where to start, just start brainstorming, right? Just, what you're focused on, what the objectives are that you're driving to, how do you put a structure around it to get to a place where you can evaluate how things are going. Give yourself a health score for, how things are going, and celebrate those successes, really do, but also take the time to look at the things that aren't working and start breaking down those issues into their components and start coming up with bright ideas of how you could fix it.
Wonderful. I've so enjoyed our conversation. As always, Christine, it's always a joy to speak with you. Thank you for the blessing of your perspective. That sentence, kindness and compassion is an underutilized asset, will stick with me amongst many other things that you shared today. And carve out time to spend time with you. And if you don't get what you want, ask for it. Go ask for it. So,
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you so much, Christine. Really appreciate you being here today. And for everybody listening, thank you for participating in this part of our Connected Teamwork Summit. We've been talking to Christine Linde, who's a Group Director, Global Marketing Director of Microsoft Business Group at Eviden. And we've been talking about the team-defining moment of group reflection and learning. Next, we will talk about how do we actually make decisions? How do we make decisions and stay connected? Thank you so much, Christine. Thank you, everyone, and see you after the break. Welcome back to the last discussion on team defining moments today of the Connected Teamwork Summit Day 1. We're going to talk about making decisions. And with me, I have Jill Myers, a licensed pilot, private pilot since age 17, amongst many other things. I'll say more about Jill in a second. How are you doing today, Jill?
I'm great, Hilke. It's great to be on with you again.
Same here. Same here. It seemed like yesterday.
It
We
does.
meet on these screens. This is great. And so we're going to have a conversation with Jill about how do we create connectedness when we make decisions. A few things about Jill, besides that she's a licensed pilot since a little while ago. She's more than 40 years of experience in aviation and aerospace, including 8 years in the US Air Force and 30 years as an aerospace engineer, program manager, and business leader. She's also a independent management consultant for 6 years and holds now a senior leadership position at an engineering services company that supports, again, something to do with the aerospace, transportation, and national security industries. Besides all this work, Jill is very busy in outreach and mentoring of the people that are girls and women that want to consider STEM education. And she's been doing this for more than 20 years, lots of decades here. She's been honored by the Royal Aeronautical Society in London and is the recipient of the National Aeronautics Association's 22 Catherine Wrights Trophy, and acknowledging her for her 40 years of dedication to the aerospace industry and her tireless commitment as a volunteer and role model, working to educate and inspire young girls around the globe. I think that says it very well. One of the things I love about Jill is her incessant curiosity and willingness to think about things deeply, and her willingness to embrace herself and others in the process, helping people find their place in the world. So yes, Jill, let's talk about this topic of making decisions. So
Yes.
what have you learned about connectedness and making decisions?
Well, it's the core of it, really, if you ask me. I have brought into all of the organizations I've worked for this concept that not only does everyone have a voice, which is a fairly standard phrase you hear, but too many organizations don't connect all of the people to make a decision that need to be involved. They always think that you just go to the one expert, or such and such organization doesn't have to have a part of it. And it's just really not the way to do it. A lot of the public speaking I do is about using, as women in aviation as a platform, but talking about how important it is to have a variety of people in an organization, on the board of directors, what have you. And it's for the well-known reason that different people with different backgrounds, whether it's cultural, gender, what have you, they all bring a different perspective, and you need all of those perspectives to make a decision. And it's just overlooked a lot. And there's not always, at a lot of places I've been, there's just an assumption that the fewer number of people that you get involved in making a decision makes it easier. Mm-hmm. And I have actually found the opposite, because, just as like super easy examples, as an engineering manager, you are often processing changes to your program. The customer comes to you and says, I really don't like it blue. I'd rather have it green. And you're already done the product, right? So, do you make that change or not? Well, it's not just a management decision of the engineering management or the program management. You need the finance people in there. You need the contracts people in there. You need the people that would actually have to do the work to change the color. There's, the common term is stakeholders, but most people, I think, falsely think of stakeholders as only people above them. Senior leadership, they must be the stakeholders because they run the company. Well, no, what about the people that it impacts at, any level of the company? And that's just overlooked a lot. So, I'm a huge fan of connecting as many people as possible to make sure that you really do make the right decision for everyone. Now, not everyone's going to be happy all the time, of course. You can't reach that very often. But at least you at least the person who has the responsibility to make the decision, they really need as many inputs as possible. So they're really educated about impact and possibilities and alternatives, which don't often get discussed. So the more people you involve, I think the better off decision-making gets.
Can you give an example, Jill, of how that has played out in your career and life? Can you give an example of where you may have learned to include more or less people in the decision, and like how did you create connectedness with the people around you that way?
I'll give you an example where it didn't go well because it was a learning moment for my whole organization. And, unfortunately, sometimes it takes something bad to happen before people will kind of wake up. But I was at, I guess I can name them because they're always in trouble anyway. I was at Boeing way back when I was at a very special part of Boeing that was an organization of about 700 people that were trying to do something that had never been done before. You're going to laugh, which was put Wi-Fi on an airplane for passengers to get online. This was way back. And I was on another program at Boeing, and a vice president came to me and my boss one day and said, tomorrow morning, you two are going to go over here and fix this mess of this program. So we went over there, and I immediately noticed that the engineering department was split into 3 distinct buckets. There were people who put the equipment on the aircraft, the wireless access points, the whole bit. There were a group of people that leased time and space on the satellites where we would bounce the signals off of. And there were people who updated and maintained ground stations all over the world. And that's just how the signals routed. So our launch customer was Lufthansa in Germany, and we had it installed on, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 aircraft. And Lufthansa called us one day and said, we don't know what's going on. All of the systems are down. Nothing's working. Passengers are not happy. Like, what the heck? So my boss and I went and did some digging, and we found out that the people who are in charge of the ground stations were asked to make a change to the software and didn't think they had to tell anybody. So this is a massive integrated worldwide network. They flew to Switzerland, which is where this one happened to be located. They updated the software, didn't tell the people who had the equipment on the airplane, and everything stopped working. And it was, and they basically just said, we don't ever talk to those people. We don't need them to help make decisions. It's like, well, yeah, you do. So, that was one example where something had to go really badly for the organization to understand. And then something that we implemented then, which I've tried to bring into especially startups that I've worked for, who tend to work a lot more on the fly. They don't want to be a Boeing. They don't want to become, a behemoth process intensive organization, but there's a middle ground. So there's a concept for, there's a method for decision making that has worked in a lot of places, big and small. And it's commonly in engineering called a change control board. And I actually just introduced this at my current company, which is relatively small. And of course, they immediately, pretty much everyone sort of balked at it at first and then said, well, maybe we'll think about that someday. But basically, a change board, you put together for a given organization the minimum number of stakeholders. So as I said before, you always have someone from finance and someone from engineering and someone from the business side, one of each, basically. And then the person who wants a change done or needs a decision of any kind made, whether it's to add more money or change schedule or change technical requirements or whatever the change is, you bring everyone together. The person comes in and presents the decision that needs to be made. Everyone hears it at the same time. They can ask questions. You can hear each other's questions. What a concept. And really come to a good decision. And again, usually on a change board, there's a chair of that board, possibly a vice chair, and they have ultimate decision authority. But again, Hilke, it's a way to fairly easily, in a streamlined fashion with a process defined, Bring the right people in the room, get everyone's opinion, and then you have an educated basis from which to make that decision.
Very clear, very clear. I'm thinking about how Jill makes decisions in her life and how you
Not
practice
well.
this and how you practice this principle of involving stakeholders.
Yeah.
And you know, how many what are the right stakeholders? Like, how do you make sure it doesn't become like overly cumbersome?
That's a good question. And it's funny, you know, I've talked to a few people recently when I've said, you know, it's funny that Hilke wants me to talk about decision making, because on a personal level, I'm pretty bad at it. Every single person I've said it to said, no, you are amazing at making decisions because you make them at the time with the best information you have, like always. It may not be the right decision down the road, you know, in hindsight. But the way I make, it's funny. So as a fairly anal engineer, you know, I used to make personal decisions with spreadsheets and weighted columns. I used to go really nuts with it. And it never worked for me. You know, I used it as an excuse to say, well, this is why I'm picking job A over job B, because my spreadsheet tells me it's a better answer, right? Which is crazy because it ignored all the emotional side of it, first of all. And, you know, a lot of people say you should make, you know, business decisions without emotion, but you really can't do that, especially if it's your own life. So what I've done, and I talked a little bit about this, I think in our last podcast, is someone shared with me a concept several years ago of having a personal board of directors. So for my personal career decisions, there's a few people I always check in with who've known me for a long time, one of them for sure. And, you know, they don't really say, Jill, you should do A and not B, but they give me different perspectives of theirs for me to think about. And they know me so well, and they've seen me make prior decisions, good or bad. So for business decisions, like, do I take a new job? Do I do consulting or direct work, which is always a struggle for me between those two in the last 10 years or so. I just really think about what's the most important to me. You know, I do try to figure out what my priorities are, which to be honest, isn't always easy, you know? So, you know, in a given year, compensation might be more important to me than the exact job. You know, I never care about title and level. I just want to really love what I'm doing and be passionate about it. And then personal decisions are a little harder. You know, I've moved a lot since I left the military. It was just sort of in me to move every 3 years. So I kind of still do that all these decades later. And I guess I have my own personal group of people, you know. My best friend in the world has been my best friend since we met the first day of 9th grade. His name's Jeffrey. Jeffrey and I have been, you know, extremely close all these, I don't know how many years that is, a lot of years. And, you know, you go to someone who's known you since you were 13, 14, and they've, you know, he's seen me navigate through my entire crazy life. And, you know, he's usually the first one I'll just go to and really ask for guidance if it's a personal question. And then I'm very close to my older sister. We grew up together and she's 2.5 years older. So, you know, Vicky's always so Vicky and Jeffrey are like my main go-to people because they just know me so intimately well. And they have, you know, we have obviously a close enough relationship where they can just tell me if I'm out of my mind. They can just look at me and say, you are crazy. What are you thinking? And I appreciate that kind of honesty from them, you know. And I have some newer people in my life that I've known for, you know, I have 2 really good friends here that I consult with all the time. They're both amazing, amazing women. But I try to get, you know, sort of to my business point earlier, Hilke, I try to get different people's perspectives, you know. So people who've known me a long time, people who maybe don't know me that well and see me in a different light. Because again, everyone has a slightly different perspective. So you don't want to only go to people who've known you your whole life. Right. So I do try to get a mix of perspectives from different people, whether it's a personal decision or a work one.
I love this idea of having a personal board of directors for your life and then also for your work. We're going to take a short break in a moment. And then after the break, we're going to talk a little bit more about How do you choose who you give a vote to? Be back after the break. All right. So who do you give a vote to? Like, let's say your best friends are saying things that are totally contrary to what you think. What happens?
I actually like when that happens because it makes me think harder, you know? So when I want to do so, and this has happened several times, even recently, you know, when I'm really gung-ho about doing whatever it is, whether it's, you know, moving or whatever, if someone who knows me well, and even if they don't know me long term, but if I trust them implicitly, which is number one criteria, if they just look at me and say, I think you're on the completely wrong path and this is why, it's really helpful to me because number one, I don't want everyone to agree with me all the time. That's super boring. But I just like people who have enough wherewithal, enough strength to debate with me about it, you know, because sometimes they'll bring up something I didn't think of. More often, though, to be honest, they will bring up things that I've already thought about and have tried to discard on my own. And then they bring it back forward and put it in front of me and say, no, you really need to think about this, you know? So getting that challenge.
I can't help but interrupt you because I want to hear, can you give us an example of how this, can you give us an example? Maybe it's in the way back past, so it may not be as vulnerable or fresh or sensitive, but maybe can you give us an example of how you looked at it? Because I think it's really helpful for us to hear that.
I will give you an example from way back when, because it's the first thing I always give you, Hilke, the first thing that comes into my head. So I quit college on a full scholarship and decided to join the Air Force, or was thinking about deciding to join the Air Force. And so I was 19 at the time. I had done one semester at college, full ride. My scholarship escalated every year as the costs went up. And I just decided I didn't want to do that. Felt very much having a lack of direction and just quit. Really upset everybody. And I started working at a department store as the manager of the juniors department in a department store in Phoenix, Arizona. And one of the people who worked in our department brought in an Air Force brochure one day because she had gone to talk to a recruiter. And it had never crossed my mind. I had never met anyone in the military. I never saw anyone in uniform in my entire life. It was completely foreign to me. And I'm reading the brochure and I'm like, I could go back to college someday and they'd pay for it. I can travel the world. I can get the heck out of the house because I had moved back home like an idiot. And so I went to my, at the time, personal board of directors, right, at 19. And most people were like, you are out of your mind. Like, what are you doing? And my favorite comment was from my grandmother, who said, nice Jewish girls don't go in the military, Jill. Thank you, Grandma. And my parents were very, didn't understand what I was doing. My friends at school were just like, you are nuts. And it was just not something that my crowd did. You know, my crowd wasn't a group of people going off to join the military. But there was something in me that just constantly said, I want to finish college. I don't have any money to do it now. I want to travel the world. And this is a way to do it without paying for it. And as you mentioned, I got my pilot's license when I was 17 and I wanted to be around airplanes. And I'll be totally honest with you. I got some support from my father. My parents were divorced. So my mother and stepfather were like, yeah, no. My real dad was supportive, shockingly, because he's an amazing man. If he's listening, hi, Dad. And, but the person who really, interestingly, the only person in my family who was supportive at all was my dad's brother, my uncle. My uncle, he passed away a couple of years ago. My uncle was a very out there, said whatever was on his mind. Like he drove my grandparents crazy. But he kind of understood me. We had a really close relationship when I was a teenager. And literally, I remember sitting in a restaurant with him and explaining to him that I wanted to join the military. And he was the only one who said, I think it's an amazing idea. I think this is why. I think you should tell the rest of the family to go whatever. I won't use swear words on your podcast. And he was like the only person who really made me feel or helped me feel like it was a good idea. And I just felt like he understood me better than at the time anyone in my family. And he really gave me the courage to go do it, which is really interesting. And of course, once I went in, I loved it. But that was the time when my own normal default personal board of directors were all like, nope, nope, nope.
No.
You're a mistake. You're going to hate it. It's going to hate you. And then the one guy that I just felt a real personal bond with, my uncle, he's like, I think it's amazing. And I think you're very brave. And I think you ought to do it.
Amazing. Amazing. Tell us about, how did you then choose to give your uncle a vote and not the rest? How did that happen?
I think it was because, I think it just started pouring rain outside. I think it's because I had always felt a close connection with him, and not that I didn't with everyone else that I talked to, but he just framed it in such a way that it just gave me, as I said, the courage to just make my own decision.
Right.
And everyone else came to me with more of it's not what you should do because it's not what's expected of a 19-year-old Jewish girl. I mean, I just kept hearing that over and over again from my family. Not that that has anything to do with not joining the military, but I just always felt like my whole teenage years, from when I was literally 12, 13, his name was Sidney. I always felt that Sidney understood me better than anyone in my family. He was the only one who would just, like, we were at a big, again, there's a lot of swearing involved, but we were at a big dinner one night this is my dad's side of the family. We were at a big dinner one night in a restaurant with my dad and my grandparents, my dad's second wife, my sister, and Sidney. And everyone started yelling at each other because my grandparents, my grandmother yelled a lot. So they were like yelling at this restaurant. And can I swear on your show? Is that allowed?
Go ahead.
So my sister and I are looking at each other, and everyone's looking at each other. And the yelling was just ongoing. And Sidney just stood up and said, would everyone just shut the fuck up? And everyone else in the restaurant looked, and my whole family just got total quiet. I was like, yay, Sidney. He was just like, he could settle anything. He could go right to the root of stuff. And it was, so I just had that bond with him because I was kind of the same way. I was very mouthy and said what was on my mind, and still do. And he and I just sort of had that in common. So, I took in everyone's perspective, but the people who were telling me, no, you shouldn't, didn't really have a reason, except that I was Jewish. It's like, well, that's not a reason.
I hear you. I hear how your uncle was able to frame the root of the issue for you, and that is probably an important part of connected decision making, where we're able to get to the root of it, and that resonates. My sense is there's some truth that resonates. It's like, yeah, that's it. Even when he spoke about the restaurant, yep, that's it. He's truth spoken that has gravitas, that has a clang to it. So therefore, it will lead to decisions. We are getting toward the final minutes of our conversations.
Already,
it's going fast. So I'm going to ask you this to give us some practical tip for a person that doesn't have a personal or professional board of directors. What would you say to them? Where to start? What to do?
Well, I would say that it would be helpful to build one. And, when I first heard that term many years ago and thought about, well, who would my board of directors be? I immediately jumped to the people who first had historically provided me incredible guidance and I felt knew me really well and could be really honest with me. And as I said, I think in our last interview, an amazing woman named Krista in New England has been the head of my board of directors, the chair of my board for over 10 years now. But I think if you just stop and think about your inner circle, which is what some people call it, if you think about your inner circle and the people that you most, think about the people that if you have a really hard decision to make and you don't know what to do, usually there's a couple people you'll pick up the phone and call. So just sort of think through your normal, think about what you've done in recent years when you've had a really hard decision. Who do you reach out to? Who do you ask advice from? That is your personal board of directors, I think, whether you call it that or not. I just named Krista as the chair of my board because she is probably one of the few people who gives me equally amazing perspective and guidance, both personally and professionally. So when I'm making a job decision, she'll bring in personal things she knows about me, whether it's what she knows I like and don't like. She knows why I have taken or left prior jobs. So she provides like the full package of guidance, and everyone else kind of has a slice of it. But like I said, I think everyone could easily just sit back and think about who are the first 4 people you pick up the phone and ask advice from. And very likely that's your personal board, and you can change it over time. When I moved to New Mexico almost 5 years ago and met these 2 incredible women I met them through work, and now they're like my 2 best friends here. They've become members of my board, and they don't know me as long as the others. But I think, again, that's good because they've only seen me in recent years and they have a different perspective on my history and my abilities and all that. So kind of mixing up your board with, again, people with different knowledge of you, I think is helpful too. Kind of that same concept of getting a variety of inputs from people with different backgrounds and different thought processes and different feelings of things.
I'm going to take this with me, Jill. This creation of a personal board of directors for decisions. I think it's such a rich way. We start this day today as we're wrapping up these first 16 defining moments at the Connected Teamwork Summit with yours. I think it's such a beautiful form to bring people together, because our ego self always thinks, I have to do this by myself. And my, bigger self is actually, like you're saying, is reaching out. We learned that from you today. We learned from Carson to the value of appreciation and seeing each other. We learned from Erwin about setting goals that help us to get untied from our own limitations. We learned from Matt about the value of actually being truthful and setting a higher purpose in creating safety around being truthful. We learned, I have to look at my sheet here because there was so much learning today. We learned from Vignesh about the sapling trees that create deep roots first and not race to the top. So that groundedness and helping others to find that for themselves to be of service. We learned from Christine, really making sure we take time for ourselves and have that compassion and kindness are a resource that is underused and underutilized also to ourselves. And we're just finishing this with a conversation with Jill Myers, who is a private pilot licensed since age 17, an aerospace guide for many people, and a STEM promoter for girls and young women and other things, really believing in the human potential. And she's helping us to understand the value of having a personal board of directors. Thank you so much, Jill, for being with us today. Anything else you want to say by way of closing?
No, just I wish everyone well, and just make sure you have a good community around you, regardless of what you label it.
I love it. Thank you so much, Jill. We're going to close our sessions now on YouTube and LinkedIn, and we're going to move to Zoom. You'll see the links in the chat windows right now, where we'll have an interactive dialogue for the last half hour of today to look at our learnings from today, what we learn about connectedness, and then tomorrow we'll resume bright and early at 8:30 and look at the final 6 team-defining moments that build connectedness. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you on Zoom.